Hello, this is the Fight Back podcast, hosted by exercise scientist Georgia Very. Here you'll find a series of honest conversations about martial arts and mental health. My guests and I explore the statement that every martial artist has heard: martial arts saved me. How and why do combat sports save people? Listen to find out. Hey there, conscious combat soul. What, you? Yes, I'm talking to you. If you listen to this podcast, then you are a human being who loves combat and wants to be conscious about the way that you're doing it. You're interested in being more trauma-informed, more inclusive, and more ethical in the way that you teach and participate in martial arts and combat sports. And that's why I would like to invite you specifically to join our new group, the Conscious Combat Club. We're on Facebook, and there's an emailing newsletter that you can sign up for, the details for both of which are in the show notes here. But now, let's get to today's episode.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you so much for joining us today to kick off Trans Awareness Week. We're really excited to have a chat about how we can support and include trans and gender diverse martial artists in our spaces. I'd just like to begin our live podcast today with an acknowledgement of country. So I'd like to pay my respects to elders past, present, any Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander people who might be joining us today, and also just acknowledge that we're all joining from different lands. So I'm on Wurundjeri country today, and feel free to pop the lands that you might be joining from in the chat as well. And I'll hand back over to Georgia.
Yeah, I will introduce myself very briefly first, because I would love for the focus for today's panel discussion to be really on Penny and Pharrell. But my name is Georgia, I use she, her pronouns, and I run a trauma-informed kickboxing program. And a big part of that for me is making sure that we are looking after all people in our community. And for me, that really means all women, and that includes trans women and non-binary people. And so it's been something that's been really important to me, is to start to learn more about how we can be better allies to trans and gender diverse people. And so the timing of this week is just beautiful, and I feel very fortunate to have both Penny and Pharrell here. So Penny, perhaps if you could introduce yourself first, and then we'll turn to you, Pharrell.
Sure, thanks, Georgia. Hi, everyone. My name is Penny McKay. I use she and they pronouns. I work in for Pride and Health, so I advise on best practice for inclusive healthcare service delivery. I'm also a graduate of the Fight Back Project and an advocate for trauma-informed movement, and I also support the diversity inclusion work of the Fight Back Project as well. So it's a real pleasure to be here in that capacity today and to learn with and from you all as well.
And Pharrell.
Oh, okay. Well, Penny's raised the bar so high, I was just going to introduce myself as Pharrell, like Cher.
Here we go.
So it started. I've had my coffee now. I'm ready to go. So
Yay!
I'm Pharrell Shaymar, he, him pronouns. I'm a professional boxing and kickboxing coach, so I focus on the stand-up for martial arts. So I've been doing that for 12 years. Transgender male, so trans man, proud and happy. And yeah, I've been doing it for advocacy work for quite some time now. I'm just trying to, like Georgia and Penny, just really advocate for the space and just raise awareness to support inclusivity in martial arts.
Amazing.
All right. Thank you so much, both of you, for being here. Now, for everybody live and listening at home to this podcast, we have had so many questions received around how we can be better allies to trans and gender diverse people in martial arts. We would love to start out with some definitions to really make the conversation flow a little bit more coherently. And then we're going to get into some of those questions. If we miss your question, we are sorry. We're going to do our best to get through as much as we can, but know that there is more to come. So watch this space. But I'd like to start out by asking, what do we mean by an ally?
Awesome. I'm happy to jump in.
Yeah.
I guess an ally is just anyone that actively promotes inclusion. So, and it's a verb, it's a doing word. We want to, I guess, move away from passive inclusion and just including people with words. We want to look at ways that we can actively include people in spaces. I think that there can be some kind of stigma around who can and can't be an ally, but it can be anyone either inside or outside of the LGBTQ community. So for myself as a queer person, but also a cis woman, I'm an ally for trans and gender diverse people in all spaces. And I want to try and demonstrate that through really intentional and conscious efforts to benefit trans and gender diverse people as well. So yeah, that's a bit of a summary.
I love that. And when we say trans and gender diverse people, what do those terms mean?
Pharrell?
Oh, I thought you were going back to Penny. Say that again. Go back to.
Sure. Can you give us a definition for what we mean by trans and what we mean by gender diverse? I'll
leave that one for Penny if that's all right, because I know she does that one well. Very articulate without saying there.
This is a martial arts podcast, but actually it's now a game of tennis. Trans and gender diverse just being, I guess, umbrella terms for people whose gender is different to what was presumed for them at birth. So I guess that's a simple kind of way of also explaining that for people who might not know, or who might sometimes get confused or conflate gender and sexuality as well as being the same thing. But, of course, we know that they're not. But that kind of terminology, trans and gender diverse, we're also recognizing that gender is fluid, and even though some people may experience gender in a binary way, that's not true for everyone, of course. And so we want to include, I guess, binary trans people, so women and men who are trans, and also non-binary trans people as well, and sister girls and brother boys as well.
Thank you, Penny. I want to ask now a bit more related to martial arts, but also generally, right? Why is it important to try and include people? That sounds like an obvious question, perhaps, but what are some of the things we know in terms of the research about what happens when we do and when we don't include trans and gender diverse people in sport? And so for us, of course, we're talking about martial arts.
Yeah,
Pharrell,
absolutely.
take it.
Yeah, no, well, I just think it really shows up in terms of lived experience. So I'd love you to speak to that, Pharrell, as well.
So to be included, it's, as George was saying, is a bit of a funny question, because no one should really have to bring that topic up of why. But to break that one down, to be included just means trying to find a good way to say this. So I generally would just basically say to someone, if I'm just speaking on my own behalf for a second, I don't want to have to ask, can I be included? I would just like to go into a space and have the same acknowledgement, the same support as anyone else. As I said previously on different podcasts, if someone with crutches comes in, you open the door, you support them, you show, can I help you? It shouldn't be any different from someone who has an injury, someone who's new, someone who's a little bit worried, to just feel that inclusivity in the environment regardless. Obviously, we're speaking about gender on this one, so then the topic would be related to that. The problem is no one actually knows when you walk through the door who you are or who you identify as. So why should you treat them any different just because they look a little bit different without your, assuming? So to be included is just to be treated like anyone else. The reason why that is so important is because not only it gains a sense of purpose within an environment, because it can be an intimidating environment, but more so it's just for the person to grow themselves. You can't grow if the first thing you're thinking of is I'm fearing or someone's bullying me, especially within that space, which is to take away all the reasons of going to that space to begin with, to gain self-awareness, to gain confidence, to promote mental health in a positive manner. To not be inclusive in that manner will just constantly deteriorate someone's mental health and well-being. It will drain their confidence. In fact, they'll just go backwards to the point where going to a gym or a martial arts place will be the last area they want to be in. And it could potentially cause more trauma and triggers within that space.
Yeah, absolutely. So many good points there, I think. And it's just such a interesting question, because obviously, trans and gender diverse people have been actively excluded from spaces for so long. And so therefore, that's the reason we have to build those bridges to create that equity. But really, it sort of also raises the question of, can trans and gender diverse people ever just be and show up to a space and just participate without those barriers. And obviously that's what we want to get towards. But we also need to build those bridges now to make sure that that happens, and we actively, I guess, combat that discrimination and stigma from the past as well. But also just trying to, I guess, remove as many of those barriers as possible as allies, to take that burden off the folks that are entering our spaces.
Yeah. Before we get into, oh, sorry, go ahead, Pharrell.
No, you go. It's all good.
I just wanted to say, before we get into talking about some of the benefits for martial arts participation, wow, we're doing well on a Monday morning. I do want to touch very briefly on some of the statistics around what happens when we include versus what happens when we don't, because I think a lot of folks are very unaware of those statistics. So yeah, I would love if you would share that with everyone. Penny, I know you're across that.
Yeah, absolutely. So Pride in Sport have actually done some work around this, and just the kind of, I guess, trying to look at the uptick, the positive impacts when people are included is often, I think a better reflection, especially in a week like this and leading up to Trans Day of Remembrance as well. But people's well-being increases by something like 70%. I don't have the exact statistics in front of me right now when they are actively included. We also know that for young people, if we're using their chosen name and their pronouns, that suicide attempts reduced by up to 2/3. I mean, these are massively impactful actions that all of us can support, either, in our own spaces or just through conversations with people, just through being in this conversation today and telling someone what you did at 9 a.m. on a Monday morning, and knowing that those conversations are being had. So the statistics are really challenging, really hard to see, I guess, what the actual impact of exclusion is. But then conversely, also that once we do those really simple things that everyone can do, just how excellent those outcomes can be and how much improvement can be seen.
Yes. And drawing on that improvement, right, we have a question around how can martial arts benefit trans people, both mentally and emotionally? Pharrell?
We're gonna have to need an intro every time. What was the question again? Sorry.
So how have martial arts benefited you mentally and emotionally?
It took away from what was going on at the time. So I was 18. So at that particular time, I was still not being approved for hormone therapy and surgery. And I was 120 kilos at the time. So martial arts just took away, or the training aspect took away from what was going on at the time, because obviously it's a 24/7 ongoing mental and emotional battle that you are going through, especially when your life is in someone else's hands. So being able to train also, apart from releasing the general stress and endorphins that you do when you start training, it allowed me to find a happy space, a happy place, socially be able to speak to people, because I was always in my room on my own. So it was adapting to a bit of a different life, but the benefits were just extremely through the roof, and to the point that I actually went from 120 kilos to 73 kilos. Obviously, within a couple of years, it wasn't that quick, but I didn't even realize I dropped the weight. I didn't realize the progression I had, and I didn't realize that my well-being was improving so much that I did become a different person. And obviously, it's a bit hard to keep track of yourself at that time, but without that, I probably don't know where I would be, to be personally honest.
Thank you so much for sharing that. I want to take a brief break from this conversation, and just to say as well, if any topics that come up as part of this conversation, there are a lot of really difficult things that might come up, especially around mental health. So as you're listening live, take care of yourself. And if you're listening to the recording, take care of yourself as well, whether that means pausing or jumping offline or doing whatever kind of self-care grounding techniques really, really work for you. And yeah, did you have anything to add to that, Penny?
Yeah, well, thank you so much for sharing. I mean, I think martial arts can just be so incredibly personal for everyone within the LGBTQ community, but particularly for trans and gender diverse people. It can just create a community space that is uplifting and supportive when that might not be possible in other places. And obviously that's why this conversation exists and is so important. But yeah, I mean, I think that just within even what you were sharing then, Pharrell, it just seemed as if having martial arts was just a place where you could be and excel and, you know, be in touch with your body and feel your body, even at a time where that might have been a difficult process and a difficult period of time. And, you know, that's always something that Georgia and I talk about as well. Like, you know, what does a grounded world look like? What does a world look like where people are able to move in a space where they feel safe and connected? And so, you know, I think that that's provides an incredible emotional benefit.
All right. What are some of the very best and very worst things you've seen coaches do around LGBTQ plus inclusion?
Pharrell.
It's not funny. I'm just laughing because I'm like, oh God, there's that list. Let me get my notes now. The worst things, well, the worst things can be from obviously not using pronouns. Now, obviously, when I was in martial arts, you know, no one would say, no one used pronouns. It wasn't as visible as it is now. But for example, people just saying she all the time to me, just for maybe because I had looked more feminine, which, okay, I can understand the assuming, not that we could accept, you know, would like to accept that, but just using pronouns that, especially specifically after you've said, hey, could you say he, him instead of she, her? And they still are actively doing it. Or even that aside, if someone's saying, could you call me P instead of Pharrell? And they're actively still saying Pharrell without the acknowledgement of, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to. Just actively mispronouncing things, doing things inappropriately in terms of the inclusive language. And more so, maybe relevant, irrelevant, but partnering with people. So I'm big on putting people at similar levels, or let's say similar genders. And I say that because some females want to be partnered with females, and I'm acknowledging of that. So I'll put them with them. Some of the boys want to be around the boys. So this is more for the comfort and the inclusivity of the individuals, not for genders. And a lot of trainers will just put anyone with anyone who may not like particular people. So I've been partnered with people who don't like trans. I don't think that's exactly ideal for me. A different environment for myself, but to have trainers just on purposely go, well, yep, you can go with him, she can go with her, and just not really being mindful and aware of who is in your class and who they are as an individual is the most important thing. And yet that just seems to go unnoticed and just not made aware of. And if someone was to speak to a trainer or instructor and you know, pull them aside and have that conversation, and again, to just laugh it off and to do things that are just not inclusive of that individual, that to me is just not a safe space. But again, as I always put it back to, if someone goes, look, my arm's broken, well, you wouldn't be at the gym if your arm's broken, but anyway, your arm's broken, you know, and they're accommodating to that, why can't you try to accommodate for anything else? That's the worst. The best. Don't do that. So the best thing you can do as a trainer or instructor, whatever, is to just be more acknowledging. If someone, you know, for the people who do have the courage to come up to you and say something, to try acknowledge it. If you don't know, ask them, do you mind? What does this mean? How do I support you? Ask them the way you would treat a normal friend. If your friend's like, I'm having a bad day, you don't go, cool. You acknowledge them. You ask them, is there anything I can do? What could I say? You know, you just treat them the same way you would treat a friend, in my opinion. But those who don't, and I don't mean it like if they don't have the courage, I don't mean that in any way is a bad thing. You know, it is hard to speak up. But those who don't know how to speak to a trainer, my advice to trainers is to just always acknowledge and be inclusive. You should hopefully be able to read a room. Are the partners uncomfortable? Does something look like it's a little bit uneven? Be able to read the room and the energy and suss out what's going on. Pull someone aside later on privately, obviously, hey, is everything okay? You looked a little bit uncomfortable, or obviously choose your words carefully, but acknowledge individuals in the room. As a coach, I'm doing my job for everyone else. I'm there for everyone else. I'm not there for myself. Do you know what I mean? The limelight is later on when you're with your friends, you've got a microphone. You don't have to be the center of attention. It's about everyone that's in that environment to learn, to grow, and to feel a certain way. If your mindset is not on the individuals in the room, I mean, I hate to say it, you shouldn't be in that job. because we're about training and teaching others and leading a group of people to become where you are now, not about yourself. I know that may sound a bit blunt, but I speak clearly from a professional point of view and personal, where I've been in a group and it's like, why did I come here for? I might as well have just stayed at home. If that sounds a little bit daunting.
No, for sure. That makes a lot of sense. I guess for me, it's more around the worst things just being, I guess, the worst gym bro culture ever. And just being closeted because I never wanted to have any of those conversations with those people. So you're just kind of setting people up to fail, really, when you're not inclusive in that sense. And then the best things are, of course, meeting Georgia and the whole, I guess, intake process for the Fight Back Project is a person-centered individual consultation where you have the ability to share what you're comfortable in sharing, and those questions are asked, but of course they're optional. We don't want to try and force people out or force people to disclose, but if they would like to, then that's a really important opportunity to do that, or even just to demonstrate that you're thinking about those things and that's something that you want to take into consideration in your space. But yeah, I think worst things are just making assumptions about people and then putting the onus on that person to shift that narrative that might have been created, whether it's around their sexuality or gender identity or what's assumed about that part of them within a gym space. And like you said, why would you want to do that? Why would you even want to be there when it's sort of been made obvious, I guess, that that's not something that's on the table for discussion or not something that you might be safe to disclose if you didn't feel comfortable to at the start, etc. So, yeah.
I mean, if you just think about the general, like if someone goes, the common person, when you ask them, why did you go to a gym? How does it feel to go to a gym, regardless, martial arts, regardless of gender at the moment, the common person wants to go, or from my experience is to get fit, to get healthy, to, they could have had a bad day, a bad week, stress, work, relationships, whatever it is. A lot of people mostly go to a gym to try something different, to find a part of themselves, to try a new sport. So the amount of times I've heard time and time again, I feel uncomfortable, just even stepping into a gym because it can be intimidating, it can be confronting. There's different, there's a range of different people that are there, regardless, size, gender. The martial arts itself could be, more impactful than something else because it's more confronting, intimidating. And yet our role, or a trainer's role, is to just have just general inclusivity of being welcoming and being supporting and accommodating to their needs as an individual. So you're basically wanting to treat people as an individual and support them. So it's very interesting the moment someone's like, I'm gay, I'm transgender, it's like everything changes because of one term. But if they didn't say anything when they walked through the door, would they still be treated as if they were just a regular person going to a gym? It's funny how people's stigma, as you said before, the assumptions just change rapidly because of a few words, which wouldn't have made a difference 5 seconds ago, they had said that.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that kind of stigma and discrimination just writes people out of spaces, and that's why the uptake and the reasons that we need to be explicitly inclusive as well are so important, so that we can show people that that's something that we are going to take into consideration for them, and that we're going to, treat them with the respect that they deserve.
I want to talk a little bit more about some of the how around that, right? So I think we've had a beautiful conversation so far about why we need to be inclusive. Let's get really specific now about how folks can be inclusive. So I have a question here, which is being inclusive by words instead of actually taking accountability. What's the difference, right? Words instead of actions. And how can an ally support the community that shows inclusivity?
Cool. Well, it's always active allyship is always the answer. And I guess we do that through education. And we can show that in our buildings and our spaces through stickers, through signs, through wherever possible, including all gender toilets. And we can do that through our intakes, and we ask about pronouns. And all of those kind of things add up to an experience whereby people have the ability to feel seen within a space. You can never really have too many rainbow flags, but we also want to make sure that that's not tokenistic, right? It might even be really great to have a trans flag as well as a rainbow flag or a progress pride flag, or, just wherever possible, showing as much diversity within the LGBTQ plus community as possible. And, knowing that those differences are unique, and it's important to call those out. Pharrell?
That's a very good question. So what Penny had said before is amazing, with the stickers and showing not tokenism on certain things, and the accountability towards that is perfect. So you've hit the nail on the head with that. I've got a very good example of so the active difference of words versus actions and accountability. Sorry, I know a few gyms, and it's a positive thing, but I think just a different way of approach. So a few martial arts places I've been to, like, Pharrell, we don't care if you're trans, we don't care who you are, just come in, just come down, I don't care. And it's like, that's great. Probably change the words a bit. So I know people, their words of I don't care is more towards we don't care who you are, just come train. However, the words itself, apart from that, could be a little bit more inclusive and a little bit more caring. It's all right, you may not care, but it's what accountability and actions are you taking to acknowledge that you don't mind? Because for someone who's trans, they want the acknowledgement of who they are, because it could be around accommodating bathrooms, it could be around accommodating words and inclusivity within language. So when you say I don't care, you're still not taking the accountability. Are you supporting their needs? Are you actually supporting who they are? Great that you don't mind, because that's obviously a good thing, but what are you actually saying and doing? Because I know a few places recently I've gone to, and the parents have spoken to the trainers, I have a son, I have a daughter who's trans. They're like, oh, we don't care, just bring them in. Yeah, but we're telling you, we are taking accountability by actually reaching out and saying, look, could you assist our, child, him, her, she, her, him, he, she, her, for a certain reason why we're expressing this. And you're like, I don't care, just bring them in. All right, that's great. But again, you've just disregarded what the parent had said. So already that's enough to put someone off. And again, I'm brutally honest, because there's ways to be inclusive and even just acknowledging a parent, acknowledging the child or the young person or the adult or whoever. It's important to just have that understanding of, just the choice of words. We're inclusive of everyone. We want to make everyone feel included, but ask that person. Again, it's about the individual. Saying that you don't mind who walks in the gym is great, but that's like saying anyone's welcome. But by the way, we don't have a ramp if you have a wheelchair. You're just going to have to find your way up the stairs. That's basically that version. I don't know why that's cracking me up. That's basically
it's so ridiculous. Yeah, for sure. The thing is, though, a lot of people do say things like, I treat everyone with respect, or I treat everyone with the same, etc., which is not actually helpful at all. Treating everyone the same is not how we get to equity and therefore equality. We need to create nuanced approaches for people who need to be shown that they're safe in a space when they haven't been usually. And so basically what we're talking about, I guess, is just a person-centered approach. It's something that is throughout all trauma-informed models of care and support, and that extends to places like gyms. It's literally a health and well-being space, or it should be, right? And so all of those things transfer over to this conversation and how we approach building those bridges for people.
I was just about to say, to add on too, sorry to just cut that off, when some trainers do find out, or when I say find out, you've spoken up, I'm trans, that assumption again of who do I put you with? So just because someone's trans, it doesn't mean, oh, well, I'll just go put them with the girls, let's go put them with the boys, I'll just go put them over there. That's just now discriminating. So when someone opens up about who they are, you just, cool. Is there anyone you do or don't want to partner with? Do you want to hit the bag instead? Do you want to take your time? Do you want to sit and watch a class? What can I do to assist or help? What do you feel comfortable as a person? Not just assume if they're male to female, oh, just put them with the women. Oh, they're male to female, so you're born a man. Good, you can go with the men. That's just brutally discouraging someone's individual's humanity in life. And that, again, is going to dive into the mental health sector. So people like that probably shouldn't be in their jobs, but but in terms of some people who generally don't understand, because they are common things that people aren't aware of, that in itself, just assuming because they're one gender or were born one gender, they're just going to go and fit in with everyone else without understanding what they're comfortable with.
Yeah, absolutely. And also for non-binary folks as well, who might have a relationship with womanhood, for example, but not identify as a woman. You know, where are they most comfortable? What does that look like? Maybe they want to try one space and then perhaps another, and that's all fine. There's no right or wrong, as long as the people that they're working with are respectful and inclusive. Yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. I think this is such an important thing to think about, right? Because mixed gender martial arts has such an important space for, I think, where we're moving towards as a society. And what I mean by that is that we have the opportunity in martial arts where men and women and people of all genders train together, and the hierarchy that we typically see, which has been built in our society around, you know, the patriarchy, so men over women, gets dissolved oftentimes, right? There are female black belts. I really hope there are non-binary black belts. There are probably trans black belts. I don't know of any, but if anyone does know of any, I would love to interview them for the show. And basically what I'm saying is that opportunity to train all together really helps people to have lived experiences that contradict this power over or this patriarchal structure, right? They have lived experiences of being in places where the women are the most technically proficient, or, you know, any kind of variation on that type of thing that might be different to what you would assume as being, you know, men are strong, women are weak, you know, men are strong, trans people are weak, whatever that might be. So it's really important that we do try and persist in these spaces, right? And help people shift their narratives, their lived narratives, and their mental narratives. And so also I say to like everyone who's trying to do the work in that space, like, thank you. Like, that's really, really amazing. And Penny and I were speaking about how we can't always guarantee safe spaces, right? And mistakes are probably going to be made. And I love the way that you explain this. So can you expand a little bit upon this as well too?
Yeah, for sure. You know, I love a deep dive. I was just thinking a lot about what we say to people when we promise them safe spaces, and how that sometimes sets people up to fail, right? Because we can't necessarily always guarantee safety. But what we can guarantee, which is, I think, the basis of trauma-informed approaches and recovery, is the possibility of rupture, but then repair and support through that. And that is one of the most difficult difficult things for people, especially who have experienced trauma or traumatic events, to move through rupture and repair in a consistent way. Because that's very hard for people who have, you know, been through, I guess, repeated traumatic events over time as well, or whatever the case may be. But we, I think, need to identify that, especially within a martial arts space, it does replicate a lot of those power over dynamics, those power structures in society that we see. And so, you know, people might experience flashbacks, they might get triggered and whatnot, but we can come up with a way to support them and move through that at a pace that they're comfortable, as opposed to saying, well, you just can't do that now. Maybe you can't do that right now, but maybe we can explore ways that might assist you to be able to move through that kind of freezing sensation in your body. Yeah, again, it's all, I guess, up to the individual, but yeah, I just think we need to be curious and careful about how we decide what is and isn't a safe space, and how we also communicate that with people.
And you mentioned being trauma-informed. How does being trauma-informed fit into inclusion for trans and gender diverse people?
Oh, well, it operates from the same basis, I guess, which is a person-centered approach. So again, taking that time to get to know the individual and how that might work for them within a group setting, having a understanding of people's individual triggers, if that's the case for the person. And knowing, I guess, within the Fight Back project context at least, that if you need a slower session, or if you need to only do certain movements, or if you want to come to class and never hit pads, that's all okay, because, you know, the program is not about being super technically proficient, or, you know, any one particular outcome. It's not necessarily outcomes driven. It's just about how you feel in your body. And of course, that doesn't mean that people who have been through trauma can't be excellent martial artists, because a lot of them are. But it does mean that, you know, from the context of the conversation that we're having today, which is, you know, community, human rights, access, that we're also recognizing that LGBTQ people are overrepresented in terms of trauma, whether that's, you know, being overrepresented through domestic family violence and sexual assault statistics, or, you know, traumatic experiences with systems and organizations and healthcare settings and gyms. You know, we need to be able to recognize that and to embed that in the way that we include people in our spaces. And I'll just add on one thing, sorry. We talk a lot about inclusion and active inclusion. Really what we want to get to is belonging, and acknowledging deeply that trans people have always belonged, and they belong now, and they've always existed, and they exist now. And we want to, you know, really, I think, drive that in our community. We want to drive belonging, not just inclusion.
Thank you. So my next question is, what language and framing is useful around addressing transphobia? For example, if a gym member is casually repeating TERF talking points, how can coaches approach it constructively and minimize defensiveness? And can you please also explain what TERF means?
I'm going to answer that, and then Pharrell, you're up. It means trans exclusionary radical feminist. So it's a group of feminists who don't include trans women. And as intersectional feminists, we deeply decry that viewpoint, and we include all women within our feminism, and people of all genders. And as far as addressing that in the gym, I'm going to hand that over to Pharrell.
Try to be polite. It's definitely a conversation that the trainer, look, I speak on behalf of, it depends on, I usually call it the hierarchy of the gym. It's generally up to the highest person to set the example. So let's say manager, supervisor, trainer, instructor, whoever, to actually pull those individuals aside. Let's see if I can break this down into probably an easier way. It's up to the individual who owns the gym, martial arts, to have that moral and value. And I don't mean that as in you have to have morals and values, but if you're supporting and inclusive, you won't allow these things to occur. And if they do, you will set the example by pulling the individual aside and having that conversation. This is what my place stands for. This is what this gym stands for. Obviously, different choice of words depending on what kind of person you are. If you're very blunt and down the line, or want to soften it up a bit by saying, you know, I stand for the inclusivity. We don't tolerate this language or whatever that's occurred, depending on the severity of what the person individual is doing. And the reason I say the top, or the person who owns or runs that center, is because if I'm the trainer and I stand for it and I'm pulling the individual aside, not only that individual who may not like what I'm saying will go to the top. If my manager or boss or the owner doesn't tolerate what I'm saying, well, then obviously I don't fit in either. So it's one of those things where it's like parents setting an example. You can't have the one parent saying, we stand for inclusivity, and the other one going, no, we don't. It's like, well, where does the child go and what does that person do? So it's a bit of a double-edged sword in terms of that. But the overall solution, in my opinion, is to tell that individual privately that this is not tolerable here. We're not going to tolerate that language. It's not acceptable. I always like to give examples so that person can sort of have a different point of view. So then they may think a bit differently, or they may look at that topic a little bit differently. If not, I would personally not want them in my gym, because not only that person's view will start to interrupt the class itself, you're drawing on negative energy. You're allowing one person to affect the whole room. That person who's being targeted won't probably want to come back, could lead to self-harming, suicide, or who knows where they go, and you're allowing your environment of martial arts, which is all about inclusivity within the sport, to just really not take the values that he was meant to have in the first place. I hope that made sense.
Yeah, absolutely. I think it's also just making it normalized from the start, right? Like having your values, your code of conduct really explicit from the beginning. Because I think, a lot of people, if they walked into our future space and there's, flags everywhere and it's really explicitly inclusive and that wasn't their jam, then they probably wouldn't come. But it's also still important to have that conversation as well, and to take it back, I think, to those values, that code of conduct, rather than your personal viewpoints, and always take the conversation off the floor of the gym, and don't leave it up to the trans or gender diverse person to do that heavy lifting either, because we know that our trans and gender diverse community members already have to do that so much, right, in their day-to-day. And so the best thing we can do as allies is to take that burden off them, to not have to be the initiator of those conversations. It's really, really powerful, and it shows them that we have their back. And, I think that feeds into active allyship as well.
Exactly.
So I have a follow-on question from that, which is, how can we work with instructors that refuse to include trans women in women's only classes?
I was going to say, get rid of them.
It's so awful, isn't it?
And
it's education again, isn't it? Because there's just absolutely no reason from a human rights perspective that we can't include anyone in any space. The only way that would be possible is if we have a heteronormative, heterosexist world that tells us that trans people and gender diverse people are other, and then that becomes a remotely acceptable kind of viewpoint. Anyway, so I won't start ranting.
We're going to have a rant debate. We had this conversation. It is a challenging area, because it's no different than I'll give an example. I hope this example helps. I'll try to keep it short and sweet. When I had my my home gym, I had a lad who was here, and he used to hit on all of the women, including my clients and my family members. And anyway, when I found out, I thought, well, what am I going to do about this? So I pulled him aside and I had a conversation. Look, you know what I stand for. I don't condone this. Do it outside in your own time with anyone else, but not that I condone that either. But don't do it here. I'm running a gym. It's professional. And also, my mother raised me to have the respect towards women. Don't bring your outside lifestyle here, because it's making people uncomfortable. Still continue to do it. So then I just said, look, I don't think this is the best place for you, because it's not what I stand for. Not only that, I got told off later on that I wasn't a good business person because that gentleman was bringing me money, obviously renting the space out. For myself to allow someone of that nature to be in my space, I was disrespecting my family. I was disrespecting my clients. How were they going to feel safe in my area if I'm allowing one person to take that away from them? So they're looking at me thinking, well, what does Pharrell really stand for that inclusivity with females in the gym, the safe space? A lot of these people did come from trauma backgrounds. So for me, I did put them first. I did lose a bit of money, but I know this is going to sound silly, but at the end of the day, the values and morals to me were much far more important than one human being destroying all the confidence that all these women had coming into this space, because it allowed them to feel better about themselves, inclusive, and taken away from everything they had gone through. They were just reliving it again. Who am I to allow that? And I had the power to say, look, you've got a choice. I'm going to give you that chance and give you the benefit of the doubt. And he didn't. So I did have the conversation, to be honest, but I'm the kind of person where I rather lose an individual from the working environment to make sure everyone else is safe. But that's me. Everyone has a different approach. There's no right or wrong, but to allow someone's mannerisms in a working environment that's going to create more toxicity, I just don't think that's acceptable. Again, that's my opinion. And I know within the martial arts space, it's a very complex area because we are running a business. But again, there are ways, as Penny said, there's education. It may be a different approach. Can we get someone else to within the workplace to speak to them maybe in a different way that allows them to go, okay, I understand. You always have, it's always polite to give those chances, give them a bit of benefit of the doubt. But when it comes to one individual versus 50 individuals who are there for a certain reason, for their comfort, for their maybe to get away from something in life that they're trying to find, to build their life. We're not talking about here we're having a good time. Individuals that walk into your space are there to change their lives. Who are we to disrupt it because of our view just could be a little bit different? I don't agree with half my friends. It's probably why I don't have any friends. But for myself, my health and wellness mentally and emotionally, physically comes first. I always want to be in a space where I'm going to grow. There's no point in life going to a place where you're going to go 2 steps back because of someone else who may not know how to accommodate or does not want to accommodate for you. How do we grow as human beings, and how do we even provide a safe space for inclusivity in society when no one else wants to even try and make that effort because business comes first? Again, I understand business, but at the same time, it's like, what do you stand for? What does your gym stand for in this space?
Yeah, absolutely. It's just, I think it's just also the ability and the know-how to be able to sit with discomfort and uncomfortable conversations, right? And also to give people the opportunity to do better without harming other people. And that can be a tricky line to walk as well. You know, like you said, a lot of people do come to these spaces with a whole range of life experiences and their own traumas. And sometimes that can include behavior that might be problematic. Are they open and willing to grow and learn and to make amends for that? And can we move through that as a community? Or if not, then, you know, we need to protect our folks who have come to us for the sole purpose of, you know, having a space where, you know, it's trauma informed and, you know, they are going to feel that sense of community and belonging. And we don't want that to be fractured because of one individual, for sure.
Yeah, I think it's important to think about martial arts spaces too often being in smaller towns. Like, we're very lucky in somewhere like Melbourne, for example, where there are, like, I'm not sure how many martial arts gyms. It seems like very, very many. And so you have the ability to take your money with you, right? If you feel like the instructors are not inclusive, the gym is not inclusive, well, you can say, well, I'm just going to leave and go to another gym. And that's not always an option for folks who live in small towns, right? There's one gym. And I think that the pushback that comes from instructors who say, okay, we can't have trans women in women's only spaces, is there's an assumption that the participants aren't going to feel safe and comfortable with it. And that's the first problem, right? Is making an assumption without speaking to your clients. You can have that conversation, just like Penny said, that might feel a little bit difficult and uncomfortable at first. And just sitting everyone down and saying, like, there's a trans woman who would like to join, or hypothetically, if we had a trans woman join, would you feel uncomfortable? I think you'd be surprised at how comfortable most people would be, most women would be, to welcome trans women into that space. And if you did have 1 or 2 women who were like, I'm not sure how comfortable I would feel, then that's a great opportunity to have a conversation and say, well, what part of that makes you feel uncomfortable? Right. And it might be something really, you know, simple, like the change rooms. And then it's like, you know what, actually, maybe we need to move away from having these gendered change rooms and just have changing spaces, if that's possible within the gym, to make a change. Or just having a conversation with someone and saying, like, okay, maybe you don't feel comfortable to partner with a trans woman. That's okay. Maybe at the start we could have you partner with someone else, or we can have this person who's going to come into our space partner with someone who is very welcoming and inclusive, and we can start to work together. Like, at the end of the day, we can't also just force progress onto people. It's something that has to be slow a lot of the time. But I think having conversations and being willing to have that conversation is the starting point. And for me, as a gym owner and runner, that's like someone who runs a gym, that is at the forefront of the way that I run my business. And when people do push back and say, if you're running a trauma-informed program for women, how can you allow trans women into that space? That's where I'll say, well, I have conversations with my clients, because I really believe that we work together. And I don't have any empty words at all when I say this is person-centered. Every class looks different. right? I get so much input from my participants, and I think that's the way that we should run. And so our next question, right, is around what advice do you have for parents or guardians who aren't understanding of non-binary and trans within facilities, or how do you manage staff or parents who aren't accepting and inclusive? And I think it really kind of follows a similar line of, conversations. Would anyone have anything to add?
I suppose it's, everything that we've just mentioned before and what Pharrell said as well, like having those hard conversations, drawing back to values and whatnot as well. I really feel as if there is just no reason for anyone to have concerns or not be accepting of trans and gender diverse folks that aren't based on fear or stereotypes or just negative media representation. And sometimes a lot of that fear is literally just from external sources, and they've never actually spent any time with trans and gender diverse people as well. People are really hard to hate up close, right? But of course, we want to make sure that we are doing that work with people before anyone within our trans and gender diverse community could be hurt. So like you said, having, if you've got a group of cis women and you're wanting to bring a trans woman into that space, having those conversations to set them up for success as much as possible, and not, I guess, making assumptions again about what people are going to bring into those spaces, because even though people might have some universal experiences and they might have a universal love of martial arts, everybody has their own backgrounds, belief systems, values, and they may it might be a really good education opportunity, like you said, to speak through that stuff and just say, this is how we operate here. Can we move through this conversation with you? What does that look like? We're not going to bring somebody into that space until we know that there's a commitment to that respect for the individual.
We are getting very close to being out of time. I know there are so many questions that we haven't touched on, and I sincerely apologize if you're waiting for an answer to your question today. It will come soon. And if anyone has any ideas for any specific types of content that you would like us to produce, whether that's like a video series question by question, or whether we do another follow-up podcast to answer all the other questions, you can call us out on social media if you want to, put up a story and tag us and say this is what you want, or if you want to email me directly if you feel more comfortable with that. There's so many ways you can contact me. Please do so. I think it would be wonderful to end this on something actionable. So I know listeners of this podcast are either martial arts coaches or people who practice martial arts. So could we have maybe one or two actionable things for coaches and for martial arts practitioners that they can do this week that's going to move their gym towards being more inclusive for trans and gender diverse people?
I think that pronouns are always a really great place to start, just as like a really great initial respectful speaking point. And it's literally as simple as just saying, hi, my name's Penny. I use she and they pronouns. How would you like me to refer to you? And if somebody asks you why you're asking that, it can just literally be, I'm asking you because I want to make sure that you're comfortable in this space. So just knowing why you're asking as well is important. And yeah, I think that that's a really good initial step that anyone can do without, and it's free, we love free stuff.
And so to get super clear on that, if you were the coach, you would start out by that at the start of your class. And if you were a practitioner, would it be like as you're paired up with someone, you would introduce yourself? And if you're, changing partners, every time you changed partners?
Yeah, or I mean, there's a range of ways that I guess you could do it. Even if it's, I guess, those initial conversations of introducing people in a group as well. Depends on the context, but I don't really see it ever being inappropriate to do that, or if you're not sure, don't assume and check in when you can.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so perhaps everyone can pause for one moment and just picture the next opportunity that you're going to have to do that. So maybe you're going to go to Monday night class at 5:30 p.m. It's going to be a class for Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu, and you can sort of imagine yourself walking into that space. and having that conversation. I honestly find that like visualizing things before you do it makes it so much easier when you get to that point. If that feels like something that's scary and you're like, well, I don't know how that's going to go over in my gym and I don't want to be seen as like other, right? Nobody wants to be seen as other. That's why we're doing this work, ironically enough. So yeah, have a little bit of a think, have an imagine, and then when you go to do it, it'll be a little bit easier.
100%. And also, once we just make it normal, it becomes normal and it's not an other thing. And it really helps our trans and gender diverse folks as well. So, yay.
Pharrell, do you have one other actionable item?
I was going to say, I mean, the same as Penny, but maybe just a different example of just from my experience when someone new, you know, if you're the trainer, usually people come up to you first to go, I'm such and such, I'm new. I generally just, apart from my bad jokes that go nowhere, I generally go, I'm Pharrell, do you have pronouns or anything you want me to do accommodate? Usually I say accommodate and support. Because if you don't want to bring up pronouns, what can I do to accommodate and support? Generally, some people may go, yes, I've got pronouns. Can you identify me as X, Y, and Z? When I take a class, apart from my introduction of another bad joke, I generally say, hey, everyone, if anyone has pronouns or anything that you want me to say or do any differently, please come up to me, let me know. And or if after class, if I have said or missaid anything, please let me know, because it is challenging. I mean, I'm being honest, sometimes you can have anywhere from 20 to 30 people, 40 in a class. Can be challenging to remember names. I actually make up people's names as a because I just forget and I'll make up a new name, which I will be always recorrected after. Or some people like the new name I've given them. But jokes aside, because I always try to have fun in my classes and I try to keep it that way, lighthearted, but I do want a lot of people to, if that's depending on the type of personality you have in the class, just, if you do want to make it known, if anyone has a pronoun or anything that they would like to let me know before or after, please come speak to me, because it just allows the acknowledgement as a group as opposed to individually, if that's something you don't want to individually do. Because if you approach it to the class, someone may go, geez, I may want my pronouns to be used. And or again, people in the class may go, as you partner up with someone different, I'm Pharrell, he, him, or call me P. Do you know what I mean? Or whatever it is. The same way you would with your friends, I'm Jonathan, just call me Jay, just call me Jono. Do you know what I mean? So it's just making it, as Penny said, normal without having to sort of make it so complex. But as a trainer, I generally just say up front in the class anyway, so everyone's aware.
It's all also, I think, important to acknowledge that we make mistakes because we're used to living in really binary worlds. And, making a mistake is as simple as just like apologizing, correcting yourself and moving on.
Yeah.
Don't like dwell on it. Don't make the person feel bad or like it's their job to make you feel better about your mistake. We're all human and we're all trying to do our best. And, I think people do appreciate that that's the case because, again, we're all used to that really binary language as well. Like no one's immune to that. Apologize, move on.
If people would like to ask either of you any questions following up or connect with you online, can you please call out your social media platforms?
Sure, you can find me on Instagram as Voice of Small Change referring to Penny. And that's probably the easiest way to contact me. I also can email me at penny@fightbackproject.com.
My turn. I always feel weird because I'm always looking at Penny and I don't know if it's my turn to talk.
Yes, your turn.
So my one is just Pharrell_Shaymar. It's pretty simple. You can find it, or I'm on Georgia and Penny's Instagram, so just find me on theirs if you're on theirs.
Yay!
Yes, definitely. Thank you so much to everyone who has attended live. We didn't have very much back and forth in terms of it being a live podcast. We had so many questions to get through, and I think we've only really touched on half. So again, I sincerely apologize if we didn't answer your question today. Those answers are coming. We are doing our best to get that out as quickly as we sort of can. It's a very busy time of year, but I really, really appreciate everybody's openness around this conversation, the questions that came through. This week is Trans Awareness Week, so there will be many more events on as well around how you can better support trans and gender diverse people in your communities, whether or not those are specific to martial arts or not. Probably a different conversation, but there's a lot there'll be a big conversation going this week. So it's a good opportunity to have that conversation within your gym space or otherwise.
Absolutely. And I'll just quickly call out as well, QLife for a really great LGBTQ plus support service, and they're open 3 p.m. till midnight Australian Eastern Daylight Time, I believe. Also Rainbow Door in Victoria, and Transcend for anyone who might have trans and gender diverse children as well, who need only family support. Queer Combat Collective as well on Instagram, doing some great work, and we'll be having a lot of mobilization on social media this week for sure, and Pride and Sport as well. But thanks everyone.
Thanks so much everyone, and if you want to jump on your mic to say goodbye, you can do that as well too.
Thanks everyone.
Thank you.
Yay, bye.
Have you thought of something to be grateful for today? What was it? I'm grateful for the amazing women that train with me at the Fight Back Project. I'm grateful for Nari and the beautiful song Shape Me, heard at the beginning and end of every episode. And I'm grateful for you, for listening to this show and helping martial arts keep saving lives. So thank you, from the bottom of my heart. If you'd like to leave me a review to help more people find the show, that's a bonus.
Nobody shapes me but me. Don't gotta tell you what my name is, I don't gotta explain it. Walk in the room, hear a boom erupting like I'm famous. I'm here shedding shells, I'm shameless. I fear nothing, no complacence. Walk too many tight ropes with no hope, so I became this poster they hold over all the heads of trauma holders. You don't need to know my history, I move boulders. Atlas shrug, cause I lifted the weight up off his shoulders. No pretense of defense, move first like chess soldiers. This goes deeper than empowerment, cause I'm the one that power it. Physical meets mental, challenge me to keep devouring. If I can't change the scenery, at least I change perspectives. No longer isolated, but elevated and selective. Darkest places become beautiful spaces. This is where rage meets patience, meets power meets gracious. Meets, we're so glad you came, and the feeling is contagious. When you the walking impact of intended bad intentions. When you the manifesting of collecting all they tensions. You the soul and body, hold it all and still remember. But I'm a work in progress, testament to all contenders. Forgot what it was like to have control over self. Forgot what it was like to be the one in charge. Forgot in my reflection I could see all my wealth. Forgot that with my bare hands I break all these bars, barriers and obstacles. They can't cage me, they can't chronicle all my experiences and reduce them to appearances. When I was truly beaten, gave myself clearances to fall down, mess up, and get myself back up. I'm not looking for clovers cause I don't believe in luck. Damn, you were badass, I heard them say it clearly. Why thank you very much, I know now I'm not weary of what's next for me. Cause I expect to see growth like I was planted, watered, fed, and bloomed to be. The positivity and accountability, knowing they won't step if I'm the agent of my agency. I think I found my voice again, huh? I think I found my voice again, huh? I'm not sorry, you're the end where I begin. Boundaries, I know them well, take a breath and meditate. Who is she? I know her well, now I get to open gates. 1, 2, 1, 2, I don't need your permission. And if you get uncomfortable, then use your intuition to know that I won't stay where respect is ever missing. And everything I do, that's me making decisions. It's truly underrated, the value of self-worth. Forgot that I was rich from the moment of my birth. A penny for my thoughts, no really, you can't afford it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it. You cannot buy my story, rewrite it, or record it, huh?